There comes a time in the second half of life when the eyes that have spent decades assessing and tracking what is wrong with your family, what was hurtful, what was missing, what should have been, could have been, would have been different, begin to soften. You realize that fixing is futile and peace is preferable. Maybe you've experienced some of these family dynamics and are wrestling to reconcile what's happening. Things like caring for an aging parent you thought you'd moved on from, or maybe getting a text from a sibling you haven't spoken with in years, or a family gathering you kind of dreaded, but that maybe surprised you with unexpected insights, or maybe a funeral that you didn't want to go to, but that brought valuable learning, or a moment laughing with the very people you'd been angry with. I just experienced this on a profound level, having spent a couple of weeks on the road visiting my family of origin. My mother in a memory care facility, a sister that I had a strained and challenging relationship with over the years, and other family members that cope with pain in ways that have been difficult to witness. Somewhere in the 3,500 plus miles of driving, I noticed I was seeing my family and even life so differently. Not because there weren't still old wounds or everything had suddenly shifted for the better, but because I was able to hold two truths at the same time. Things I've felt on an intuitive and heart level for years were grounded in specific examples that are great depictions of something the second half of life is trying to show all of us. And I want to share those with you today. Welcome to Soul Knows the Way, a podcast for women in the second half of life who sense a soul hunger they can no longer ignore, a longing for depth, truth, and a life lived from the inside out. I'm Kim Marie, soul guide and author, and I'm here to walk that journey with you. Let's talk today about the challenge of family dynamics we face in midlife. I want to walk you through some particular moments that brought insight and awareness, and maybe that you'll recognize in some of your own experiences or can look for as you keep stepping along on your path. These are the types of things that midlife hands every one of us. And if we're willing to pay attention to them, there can be a way of seeing through them and with them that changes everything and maybe brings peace and makes us stronger, bringing a peace that we never thought was possible before. I'm going to start with going to my sisters. This is a sister with whom I've had years of estrangement, sadly, and yet it's been a slow reacquaintance in the last couple of years. Things that have been unspoken, maybe wounds that haven't been named between us, are still there. But underneath the silence, underneath the pain, aside from the wounds, it's like an olive branch has been extended. It's a gesture, an invitation to return to connection, a kindness extended maybe where words couldn't be. Sometimes, as much as I like words of affirmation, I like to hear an apology, I like to hear a verbal recognition of things that have happened. I learned a long time ago that that's not always what's possible for some people. Through their pain, an apology is too difficult. I'm not saying it's right, but I do understand the difficulty. I'm going to give you a little example of this. So that same sister and I used to go to my grandparents' house when we were little. And we loved our grandparents' house. We loved being there. They had a backyard pool and we could watch different shows and they always made great food that we loved and we didn't get at home. And we just had fun with them. We played games and we enjoyed that time as being with elders like that is supposed to be. And it was perfect. Of course, when it was time to go to bed, neither of us wanted to go to bed because then the fun was ending for a time. We wanted to be engaged. We wanted to be with them. We wanted to keep it going for as long as it could. And one night we were procrastinating on really going to sleep, as we often did as children. And I don't know, we might have been like 9 and 7. I mean, we were pretty young, maybe even younger. But we had gotten up to go to the bathroom and then we wanted to get a drink of water and we were coming down to get a drink of water, and our grandfather had been out. It was just our grandmother that was there. But when we got up to get the water, he had returned. And he shocked us. We were absolutely shocked because he chased us back up the stairs. You kids get back to bed. And he had one of those fly swatters that wouldn't hurt anyone, but a fly maybe. And was just chasing us with this angry face and angry voice that we had never heard him or seen him use before. And we were like, oh my gosh, why did Grandpa act like that? And learning more in my life, looking back, understanding more that my grandfather had probably been out drinking with his buddies and he'd come home in a state and he wasn't quite himself. And that's maybe why he had behaved that way. But of course, at that age, we didn't know. We didn't understand. All I knew was that we were scared and it was shocking. Well, the next morning we got up to go down to breakfast. And we were like kind of cautiously stepping into the kitchen. And there was Grandpa standing at the stove, making pancakes and eggs and bacon, all the fixings for an amazing breakfast. So happy to see us. And both of us kind of looked at each other and we looked back at Grandpa and he's like, so what do you want? I've got this and this and this, and listing out the things. And we just dove in and enjoyed this wonderful breakfast. And yet I was still so confused. I really didn't understand how the last time he spoke with us, he was so angry and chasing us up the stairs and seeming so volatile, and then so loving and so completely different the next morning. And I remember asking my father later on, why is he acting like last night didn't even happen? Like he didn't do that? And my father replied with something that has stuck with me for years. He said, sometimes people have different ways of apologizing, and it's not always with direct words. That really stuck with me for my entire life. And I think my sister's invitation to visit, the gestures of welcome, the care, could be exactly that, whether or not each of us felt hurt by the other. What I loved is that we both could hold the possibility of an apology without words, the possibility that we could focus on the future without necessarily opening old wounds, that both could exist together, that a reaching out might not yet have language, that the gestures might be what's possible in the moment. In many ways, this is what we could think of as the making amends. Now, in the AA 12-step journey to break old patterns and habits, that journey is amazing for breaking patterns and habits, whether they are severe addictions or substance or not. It's a beautiful journey that has lasted nearly 100 years because it's so effective. And one of the steps is to make amends. Now, they do encourage that if you're going to make amends, you don't make things worse by rehashing the old or opening old wounds. And so sometimes that is what's needed, is to do it maybe not in person, not face to face, or to let time heal the wounds, similar to the board meeting, and let time do its work below the surface. Sometimes that's what's needed. And sometimes we have to trust that. Sometimes both can be true. The love can be there and the hurt and the anger. And that is something that can be really difficult to see. But I think this journey into midlife and these different examples give us a vantage point that allows us to see more than perhaps we could have before. Similarly, I had a conversation with a client who was really wrestling with a wound, and they were telling me about something that they were feeling resentful and angry about. And I had asked what had happened. And they had done something to a family member, said something to a family member that family member found hurtful. Now, what they had said wasn't intended to be hurtful. It wasn't intentional. It was never meant to be hurtful. But the family member got triggered. And in the process, when the family member shared their hurt, their pain, this person that I was talking to was basically dismissive, saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous. That's not what I meant. get over it, move on. Well, you can imagine that the person that was hurt only felt more hurt because now they're hurt, but expressing their hurt was going dismissed, completely unrecognized. So I shared that with this client, and I said, sometimes we have to understand that the hurt is real. And they replied, well, what about my feelings? What about how they ended up hurting me? They said all kinds of things after the fact that were so unfair and so untrue and very, very hurtful. And I said, yes, but we need to honor that hurt people hurt people, first and foremost. We can get stuck in the shoulds of what they should have done, how we think they should have responded or shouldn't have responded, or what we think they should or shouldn't have said. But if we don't understand that hurt people, whether or not we meant to hurt them, then we have a hard time apologizing. We have a hard time recognizing that something, even if unintentional, happened, opened a wound, reminded them of something. And when we can begin to remember that hurting often comes from hurt, especially more intentional hurting, like lashing out because you're feeling angry versus unintentionally hurting someone, for example, when we can understand that that tends to come from a deeper wound, from a deeper pain, we can begin to forgive and let go in that vein, to say, you know what, they were hurting. I didn't acknowledge their hurt. I'm going to acknowledge the hurt because the peace is more important to me. The peace matters more. And that was one of the things I encouraged was, is it possible to go back to this person and say, you know what, I've been giving this a lot of thought. I didn't see your hurt. And it's not up to me to decide whether or not you should be hurting or when you should get over it or whether or not my words were intentional or not. The reality is you were hurt and I didn't acknowledge your hurt. And I just want to say I'm sorry for that because I could have and didn't. Maybe I didn't realize it in the moment, but I'm realizing it now. A formal apology may never come, but what matters is the gesture, the healing, the opening, and also understanding that we are all human and we're all hurting and we're all healing. Now, I'm not saying don't feel hurt by things. I'm suggesting that we simply not live in the hurt when another choice is possible. I'm not saying don't hold your boundaries and get upset just because someone unintentionally did something. I'm just saying don't shut the world out unnecessarily when relationships are precious. Now, another example of this idea of finding the beauty in the mess, which just seemed to be the theme of this entire road trip that I was on, and allowed me to recognize all the ways in which life is both. Life is this paradox. Life is the polarity. Life is this navigation of extremes. And by the way, I have a free download called My Balance and Empowerment Cards. It's in the description. It is all about navigating extremes, finding the mean between the too little and the too much. And it's a powerful tool. So go check that out. The next example that I want to share with you is still with this same sister that I was with. Sadly, she had her home burned down just a few years ago, and it had to be completely remodeled. And so seeing it for the first time since that had happened, everything was new and fresh. And she's had a really traumatic, challenging life. She lost her daughter at the age of 11, who was the same age as my son, and just a lot of painful things. And a lot of things that many of us would look at and say, why? Why me? Why this? And it might be challenging to recover from. In this recent house fire, most of their belongings were gone. The house had to be gutted and completely remodeled. And of course, she wouldn't recommend having a house fire, yet she talked about the beauty of the fresh start, the new design, unburdening herself and her husband of so much, and how she couldn't maybe have given away those things herself in any other way. that sometimes life gives us what we need to move forward in a new way. The fire didn't undo her pain, nor did it rebuild everything from scratch on its own. Her grief and her pain is still her grief and pain, and it deserves to be honored. And I've come to realize grief doesn't disappear. We will always grieve those things that we've lost. We don't have to live in that grief. But when we can appreciate that things move for us through the challenges of life, through the pain of life, again, there's beauty in the mess. Something moved through the fire that wanted to move. Both were real. Both were true together. The mess of the fire and the beauty of the rebuild and the recreation. The action is what can create the healing, even while the grief can remain. And that's something, again, this polarity that we dance, that we can begin to see and recognize as valuable. We don't get one without the other. We don't see the light without the dark. We are not able to realize the joy without the pain or the suffering. And sometimes I think midlife offers us the opportunity to do that in such a beautiful way. The next example was visiting my mother in memory care. Now, she's been 6 years in a memory care facility. I know many of you in midlife are working with this, the heartbreak of watching someone you love completely unravel. And maybe some of you were estranged from your parents, and yet you're stepping in to help because it's something you feel you need to do. The mother that I knew growing up was extremely insecure. She was very self-loathing, hyper-perfectionistic, very judgmental of herself and others. Yet underneath, I think most of us knew there was also this beautiful human being that was generous and kind. And now, when I go to see her, while it's painful to not be able to have a conversation with her, there was so much joy in witnessing her smile so big and so huge upon recognizing me and my sons, and seeing her be peaceful beyond anything I've known or seen of her before. This opening creates a new kind of relationship. My sister pointed out that the true colors can show maybe that we're hidden by the life of pain and suffering and control and perfectionism and all those things that we do to try to survive this life and to try to deal with or cope with all of the challenges that we see. And all of the workers there, they love her because she's calm, she's peaceful, she smiles, she's relaxed. And this is something she never used to be. And so again, it's a very difficult thing to name out loud. It's hard to see and to witness, but even as I can get choked up and feel the pain of that unraveling, I can feel the joy side by side where she feels freer or seems freer and more at peace than she's ever felt before. Now, I am not romanticizing dementia or saying that it's a gift, but I am saying that grief and grace can sit together in the same chair. They can sit side by side. And yes, this disease is taking her. But underneath what's being taken, something is also being released. And we can grieve both. We can receive both. We can grieve what is no more, what is happening, and we can receive what is being let go of, and perhaps a different vision right next to the grief. So then I headed to another destination and visited with much of the rest of my family. I have a very large family. And this has been challenging often in the past because my family are big drinkers and I'm not. And I have wounds and challenge from growing up with all that drinking, from the pain the drinking has caused. And yet I love my family and I want to see them. On the very first morning that I woke up after arriving there around dinner time, having dinner and just relaxing in the evening, that evening people were drinking around the fire. But I was a little stunned at first to see that by 10 o'clock in the morning, they, my family, and a bunch of neighbors were already gathered around in a circle drinking, starting at 10 a.m. And at first, my focus was on what I perceived to be dysfunction and escapism and just trying to cope with the world in a way that removes themselves from the pain. But then I observed. I just watched for a while, and more people arrived, and I noticed that everyone brought something to share. I noticed they were sharing food, they were sharing drinks, they were sharing laughter all day long. And they were sharing stories with each other, talking to each other about things, even if often in a gossipy kind of way, or the same stories in repetition that I'd heard 4 years prior when I had been there before. But what I really appreciated was observing this loyalty that doesn't quit. There is a willingness to show up for one another. This is a kind of community that I think many families have. Many families with dysfunction, many families with alcoholism, many families only knowing limited ways of coping. And it's something the wellness world isn't quite sure how to honor. And as a coach, I think this realization, this seeing of the fullness and the richness of it all is so helpful, because it's helpful to me to be able to bring that to clients who are really wrestling, and to bring it to myself for my own healing around the way I think or thought things should be or are supposed to be. Yes, the drinking is real. The harm of it is real. I am not pretending otherwise. And the love is real. The belonging is real. The ways in which they hold each other is real. I used to think, is it real? Is it real if they're drunk and kind of under a mask of intoxication? But they're there for each other even in their sobriety, in their times of need. And culture trains us to label all of this as toxic and walk away. But soul asks something more honest of us. Soul asks us to see all of it, to love them through it, to grieve what is true, and to receive what else is true. Not to collapse the whole picture into one single word or phrase or judgment or decision. We can learn through the relating where the boundaries need to be. So I'm not saying don't have boundaries. I'm not saying don't be around it. Honestly, if I lived there and was around it all the time, it would be very challenging for me. It's much easier for me to stay out of it, to stay away from it, because I live farther away. I think that gives me a beautiful vantage point to be able to see the beauty in the mess and to cultivate resilience and strength on my own, while also being able to cultivate resilience and strength through the interactive learning and understanding that I can have by doing these difficult trips. I am not talking about being in codependency or in any way enabling the behavior that I'm talking about. And in fact, if you want to learn more about codependency, watch a video that I have. I'll put it in the link in the description, The Cause of Our Suffering. It's a video for support on that and to help you see a different approach. And I know that that approach that I've been working with for years is part of why I'm able to see this reconciliation of polarities. I want to share a common teaching that I share in my programs and I repeat often, even in some of my free gatherings. Let's imagine that we see a lush green plant and it's in the center of a circle of people. And from our vantage point, we're seeing this lush green, flowering, beautiful blossoms, all this vitality. And someone on the opposite side of the circle says, "What are you talking about? I see dry leaves. This plant is dying. It's in decline. There are no blossoms over here." And we're both looking at the same plant in the center of the circle. We're both telling what we see. And both visions, both perspectives are arguably true. And maybe the reasons each side is real is because of the conditions from which we're seeing things. Maybe on the side that I'm looking at this lushness and the beauty of the flower, maybe there's a window that gives it life. Maybe the plant is slightly tipped just enough so that there's more water on this half of the pot and it gets the moisture and the water that it needs. Maybe on the other side, behind the woman looking at it from her vantage point, saying, oh, it's dying. What are you talking about? Maybe there's a wood stove drying it out. There's no window. Maybe the pot tilts toward me so the water collects only on my side and it's really dried out in the soil on the side that's near her. The plant is whole, and yet it has all of it. Isn't that true of us too? Don't we have our wounds? And don't we have our achievements and our accomplishments? Don't we have our pain? And don't we have our joy? Don't we have our darkness, our shadow? And don't we have our light? No one is seeing the whole plant any more than we can all see the whole of what's going on for someone else. And yet we can all be right, or what we see can be true all at the same time. So the either or concept, that it's either this or that, wants us to pick a side and call the other wrong. The both and asks us to widen the circle, to step a few feet around that plant, to see what we couldn't see from where we were sitting or standing. In the second half of life, this is exactly what's happening. Our eyes are widening. We're seeing new perspectives via the lived experience that we've had. The deepest healing in midlife isn't fixing what's broken in your family and even yourself. It isn't making the people who hurt you become different somehow. It isn't pretending that the pain wasn't real or isn't real. It's about growing eyes that can see the mess and the beauty without losing the truth of either. There's a story that's actually a historical parable. It's from Islamic mystical poetry and has later been used in many Baha'i faith teachings. It's not found specifically in the Bible, but interestingly, it's used to teach followers not to seek faults in others, but rather to look for the goodness and the virtue in all things. The story says that Jesus was walking down a road with his disciples, and as they were walking, they came upon a dog by the side of the road that had died. And it had died some time ago, and the disciples all just started focusing on, oh, the smell, it's terrible, it's awful. And Jesus leaned in closer and looked at this dog and noticed a few things and just said, what magnificent teeth this creature has. And the disciples were quite surprised to hear this. Like, what are you talking about? But the point is, he could find the beauty in the mess. He could find what was special about that creature, even in its decaying state by the side of the road. So I have an invitation for you. Pick a person or a situation or a chapter of your life that you've been holding a single judgment or verdict for. Maybe it's around the mother who you feel failed you, the marriage that ended, the career that didn't become what you had hoped, a friend who hurt you. And ask yourself, what else might also be true here? I'm not saying to ask this instead of the original truth. I'm inviting you to ask this alongside it, in paradox with it. Can both be true? Can more than one thing be true? What might the wood stove be in that situation that makes the plant die on one side? What might the window be that brings light and life force to the plant on another side? Ask yourself, what perspective am I not yet able to take because I haven't walked around the entire plant, around the entire situation? This isn't about forcing yourself to forgive. It's not about minimizing what was real and the pain that you might be feeling. It's about getting a bigger picture, letting that picture get bigger so that the truth gets more honest and not less honest, so that it doesn't become a perspective that has blinders on. It's about peace being cultivated in that broader perspective that can allow for continued growth, for our continued evolution. I know that it can be really challenging to name these things, and it's often not something that we do just one time. It's a way of seeing that is cultivated over years and with a certain amount of effort. And sometimes we need the eyes of others to see with a new perspective. And this is what my coaching work is all about. Coaching is so much about seeing from another perspective. It's a one-on-one depth of personal and particular attention, perhaps on family situations that help you move through things, navigating these transitions and the challenges of things like aging parents or difficult family dynamics, or finding healing in the old wounds and making peace, or shifting your habits and patterns. Every coaching client gets the Solace program, which has a whole library of added material and wonderful community gathering to offer an even broader sanctuary of community and ongoing teachings. This is a process of soul reclamation, of remembering, reconnecting, re-envisioning, and rebirthing yourself into the life that you know is possible. This has to come from a broad perspective for the multidimensional approaches via multidimensional perspectives and people. Because of that, I offer not only the coaching, but the Solace program, and also things like planning sessions, wisdom circles, fairy tale circles, new moon gatherings, personal study, Q&A, and a community of souls on the path that support and allow for new perspectives that can change your life, that change each other's lives. You can schedule a free complimentary exploratory session whenever you feel ready. I want you to know that's available, and I'm here to work with you whenever you need support along your path. So at the end of the day, over 3,500 miles traveled, so many realizations, so many opportunities to hold the truth in the paradox, the truth and acceptance of the polarities, the navigation between the extremes. My mother is still unraveling and will continue to do so. My sister and I haven't had and may never have the conversation that so often so many of us think needs to be had. The drinking in the family hasn't stopped, and it probably won't. None of that is quote unquote fixed, but something in me has changed. I now have enough room around the plant to see more of what was always there. That broader perspective is healing, not the family changing, not the past being different, me. Developing new eyes that can see the wreckage and the grace in the same room at the same time. So please remember, you don't have to fix any of it. Just consider widening the circle through the cultivation of perspective, compassion, understanding, and learning, and see what else has been there all along. Until next time, keep tuning into the language of soul, because soul knows the way.